Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this leadership dialogue entitled Rethinking the Future Chemicals Supply Chain. Our chemicals supply chain has seen significant and sustained pressure in the last few years. This is of an unprecedented magnitude and pace of change as well. This leadership dialogue will discuss those issues, the challenges, the opportunities, and discuss action plans for those. What I'd like to do is just introduce the agenda to you. We will start with a teaser presentation from my colleague, Dr. Bernd Elser, and we will then move to a panel discussion. So with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Bernd Elser up to share with us some facts and figures to set the stage for the discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon. In the morning, we heard a lot about the transition to circular economy, to sustainability. We talked about ESG performance. All of that very, very fundamental topics for the chemical industry and the Gulf region. This afternoon, we take you into a more operative theme, that is supply chain. And to kick us off, let me start with a very simplified view. You know that very well. The Gulf region is a major exporting region with deep water, deep ocean, shipping lanes towards Southeast Asia, towards Northeast Asia, to Europe, to North America. In the end, it's a lot of export-driven business. And I apologize for showing such a simplified picture. If we double-click and triple-click into that, we all know we are not talking about a few simple bar charts. We're talking about thousands of products. We talk about even more customers behind that and even more shipping locations. And if you take that to the next level, even more applications and customer systems. So that if you look into that, a bit more complex picture, and if you keep that in mind, that picture is becoming a lot more dramatic because we might be used to what you see here on the left-hand side, the magnitude of change. We all know the chemical industry has swings in demand, has swings in input costs, but what is very unprecedented is the speed of change, which is illustrated on the right-hand side. The last couple of years saw significant increases in speed of change, be it the electricity prices, be it the transport cost. I think that is something which changed dramatically. So the combination of a high magnitude of change with a high speed of change is putting a lot of pressure on supply chains. And if you look at the next chart, that is also reflected into a series of indicators. I've just picked two of them. What you see here is basically the Global Supply Chain Pressure Index, which looks at inventory levels, delivery times, and prices for shipment. And you saw basically in the last 24 months, we had unprecedented swings, pressure going up, dropping back, coming up again. So a lot of pressure in the supply chain. And if you take that to the next level and look at what does it mean for an indicator like shipping cost, I just picked here one indicator, basically from Shanghai to other regions. You saw wild swings in shipping costs. And that just is a selection of the indicators showing that we've got significant pressure and disruptions in the supply chains. And what's behind that is not a single phenomenon. This is just an assembly of what happened from a qualitative perspective in the last 12, 15 months. A combination of strikes in harbors, shipping shortages, droughts in rivers, lots of disruptions in the supply chain. You can say, well, we saw these phenomena before. That is right. But the combination of that is something which is putting the supply chains, which, if you're honest, were designed for linear supply chains, cost efficient, minimum inventory levels, that's putting significant pressure on the supply chains. If you look at what that means, all these changes, the magnitude of change and the speed of change is putting significant pressure on changing the way supply chains and also individual companies, but also collaboration between companies are operated. So all the established management routines, monthly planning cycles, all the data availability, often planned or budgeted data, or last month's data in an ideal case. If you look at the availability of customer insights, or basically the automation level to extract insights from these data, that is challenged significantly and will have to undergo significant change from our perspective. So if you look at something like the management routines, a monthly management routine planning, inventory level setting, transport management, in times where you have 20-30% changes in transport costs or raw materials within a week, obviously puts that monthly cycle at obsolescence. The data, as mentioned, planned data, budgeted data, a huge challenge if you are living in a situation where you've got daily, bi-daily or weekly changes. And basically having real-time data, real-time insights at your fingertips really makes a huge difference. Then a lot of companies struggle with getting external insights, getting visibility into long lead value chains. So what's happening in the car market, in the coating market, in China, in Europe, in the US, defines a lot and impacts inventory levels, supply chain operations planning for individual companies. But getting access to this data is still a huge challenge. And last but not least, a common thing if I talk to clients is they say, we set up a task force, and if you ask how is the task force working, best people sitting in front of paper and laptops trying to extract insights from data, manually pulling data. And I think if we look at the volatility we see in the market and the turbulence, it's a lot about automation, digitization, and creating insights in an easy way. I think this is basically the kind of things where companies are challenged and where basically a reinvention is required to stay on top of all the turbulence. The individual measures, there are a long list of things which can be done. I'm not going to train this, but it moves basically from changing the management routines, simply speaking, the planning calendars. So what used to happen on a monthly basis has to move to a bi-weekly or weekly basis. We talked about data, we talked about data availability, but there's a lot which needs to be reinvented to stay on top of that. So you cannot start everywhere, and you cannot start everything at the same time. So the question is figuring out the functions, the areas where you face significant speed of change and where there's significant value for your company. And this is just an illustration, whether it's procurement or pricing, demand planning, which often come up as high priority areas, where automation, having real-time information at your fingertips and adapting your planning cycles is typically one of the biggest challenges. So if I quickly wrap up, so what is our perspective? Developing a fact-based perspective where the magnitude of change and speed of change is hitting your business, reinventing your management routines, thinking about the planning calendars, the meeting routines, then upgrading the capabilities, the automation levels, getting access to real-time data, to external data, also moving from siloed planning function by function to cross-functional, in an ideal world, also collaborative planning with your ecosystem partners, and then basically moving from that planning towards an ecosystem, to a value chain, collaborative action, and last but not least, it's always the question, is that now a risk or opportunity, all the turbulence? From our perspective, there is significant opportunity for the companies reacting fast, using the opportunities in the market, and making sure that you capture that and staying on top of that. That was, in very short, a quick tee-up to our discussion, and David, over to you.
Dr. Berndt, thank you very much for that. Please do join us in the panel discussion. Great. At this stage, I'd like to invite the panelists up to the stage. Dick, please join us. Dick's chairman of the executive board and CEO of Royal Vopak. He's been with them for 25 years and a true global citizen, having worked in many functions within Royal Vopak. Henning joins us from Maersk Logistics, another true global citizen, having worked and lived in more continents than myself. So Henning, please join us. We need some kindness and wisdom, and there is very few that have more. Salah Al-Shabnam, former and distinguished executive with SABIC, now helping a wider variety of organizations and governments and ministries within Saudi. So thank you all for joining me. With that, I'd like to first turn to the questions we've laid out. And just in terms of questions, audience, please do submit them. We have a visual of them here, so we're hoping for an interactive discussion, and we would welcome your questions submitted. So with that, Dick, do you want to kick us off? Your perspective on the current challenges faced across the global supply chain.
Yeah, thank you very much, and great to be here and have the opportunity to sit in this panel. Maybe a few things from my side, but before I do that, maybe to put it in perspective on the context around which I'm making the comments, and that is as a representative of Vopak, and Vopak is a global services company that serves a lot of the members of GPCA in a lot of different places around the world. We do that through the storage of a lot of the liquid bulk flows that are going around the world, and we basically serve two markets. We serve the energy market and we serve the manufacturing market with the different products that those markets are shipping around the world. And we do that through investments and operations in strategic and critical infrastructure at 79 locations in different ports around the world and strategic ports around the world. So that's a little bit the context. A few things that I wanted to say about the current state of affairs and the situation that we're in, which is, as we all hear and as we all know, unprecedented from many elements, from many aspects. From our perspective, and that's what we hear when I talk to the people within our organization and with our customers, there's a few central themes. The first and the most important and most recent has to do with energy security and security of supply as a result of which. The second one is redundancy of supply. And those two elements are different today than what they were in terms of discussions 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and they're for obvious reasons completely different. Now, I believe that the world continues to be a very connected place, but at the same time, I think not all the places that have been as connected as they've been before will remain as such. And I think, therefore, there's a fundamental change that we can see today. That is a fundamental change towards the importance of redundancy in supply chains and the importance of critical infrastructure at key locations. That's what we see in the dialogue with a lot of our customers. But I also, as I mentioned, I see less connectivity between certain parts in the world, and that will have a lasting impact on supply chains. Mm-hmm. I think that's one element that I wanted to share around the current circumstances. And the only last comment is that's the medium to longer term, because while this is unfolding and happening, we're at the same time also going and having a massive task collectively to transition to a carbon neutral world. And obviously that requires collaboration, that requires a complete different way at looking into supply chains and the way we work together. So those are just a few thoughts. So yeah, energy security, redundancy of supply chains, and then still going forward, a massive need for collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Henning, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this panel. The perspective on the current challenges faced, and having given this a little bit thought leading up to this, I think the way I would probably put this is that there has always been challenges, there's always been disruptions. They are just coming a little bit faster at us now. So you need to really react or act faster than maybe what we did in the past. It ties up a little bit with the integration of the whole world. So something that happens, I mean, I think we just saw it on the slide here, the truck drivers in Ukraine are going home. How does that impact us? But all of a sudden, these smaller things that are happening, it starts impacting you. I think the major risk, and we spend a fair amount of time having these discussions, is that there's a lot of new challenges, and we need to make sure we don't apply old solutions to it. Because there is a tendency that we, tried and tested solutions, we pull them out of the bag quickly, but there's a lot of new challenges that are going to require new solutions, and we need to all be open for that. And I know we will be talking a little bit more about collaboration a little bit further in, and I think that's one of the keys to overcoming and dealing with the current challenges.
Great, thank you, Henning. Salah, please.
Thank you very much, David. Indeed, we all want to see this as a temporary phase. Unfortunately, it's unlikely to be the case. The world keeps changing, and the phase of it is, and the rhythm is increasing. For this, supply chain strategies should not build around things that may or may not happen. We should really, build supply chains that can operate at all circumstances, being, like the abnormal situations that we have been going through, unfortunately, for the last 2 years. The pandemic first, and then geopolitical problems, trade wars and restrictions. All of these call that we should be ready to build, and we should start building our supply chains to sustain such abnormalities. I don't know if it is on the positive side or not, but this area, the GCC, is not new to challenges. Since the 80s, the GCC supply chains were put under severe 4 pressures, starting first with the Iran-Iraq war, where the chemicals and petrochemicals ships, particularly in the Gulf, were targeted. Later on, 2 more wars followed, putting even more pressure and more test on our supply chains and our production facilities too. And later, the piracy erupted in the routes that our shipments go through. And as explained in the previous presentation, we are a major exporting hub to the rest of the world with long hauls. And piracy was in the Indian Ocean, in Gulf of Oman, Arabian Sea, even the southern part of the Red Sea. All of these are extreme pressures on the supply chains for the GCC. Yet I must admit that I think I will get testimony from the distinguished audience here who is as old as I am, that we emerged out of all of these problems even stronger. Now, this is good, but what has changed is that the challenges that we are facing in the supply chain are no longer regional, they are global. And they require a new set of solutions, more collaboration in order to make sure that if these turbulences happens, business is not interrupted, at least not stopped. People don't go hungry, and those who need medicine or other stuff are not put under the mercy of a system that may or may not operate. That's all, David.
Very good. Thank you, Salah. Bernd, do you want to add anything further?
Yeah, I think a lot of wisdom was already shared, so it's really hard to top that with such a distinguished panel. I think if I summarize, basically, a lot of the supply chain optimizations, be it security, be it reliability, redundancy, I think that is important to keep in mind that probably it's a lot of stuff, a lot of targets you have to meet at the same time. It's not either or, what it used to be. We used to optimize supply chains for cost efficiency, minimum inventory level. Now we need to be secure, we need to be reliable in our supply chains, and ideally also able to meet market opportunities in a fast way. We also need to be reactive. And I think these very different target functions is adding to the challenge which we have as outlined by the facts and figures and by the previous commentary.
Very good, thank you. Henning, we've talked about typical cycles and those cycles increasing. What's your view on the typical cycles in demand forecasting, planning?
Being a service provider to the industry, what we experience is that those planning cycles, they have become much shorter. I think the traditional way of setting up the business model or the system was almost on an annual basis. And then it became half year, and now we are actually engaging weekly. I am full of admiration for the people who can manage this in the production behind, because that seems somewhat more complex than the logistics that we are doing. But it requires much more agility, and it requires much more connection between us and our customers. The kind of like the notes that I took in advance for this is that the key things, I mean, the number one message is we must stay even closer to our customers now. That there is this is where it comes from, and I think we also heard that here, insights from your customers. The old days are gone. We have to. I think the data information is absolute key, because if we are planning next week's or next month's operation based on the last month's data, then we will fail, and we'll fail for our customers. I also picked up on, and what I have here is, our ways of working has been impacted, and we need to, all of us need to be, aware of this. We need to monitor it, we need to evaluate, and we need to, it was suggested, change the cadence, but maybe we also need to change the context of what we spend our weekly cadence discussions about. And then it just requires agility and flexibility. So a lot of almost going back to what I said earlier, the old solutions do not solve our new challenges. We really need to, together, to come up with ways to solve this. But to answer your question, the planning cycles, they are almost not cycles anymore. They just happen on a weekly basis, at least from the logistics point of view.
Continual planning.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Dick, any perspective on digital maturity, data, challenges there?
Yeah, I think so. It's very, very interesting to listen to the way you look at it from the Maersk perspective, and I think without knowing obviously the detail from your business, but if you look at the comparison between the container trade and then the liquid bulk trade, I think there's still so much to gain in terms of efficiency. If you look at the way the liquid bulk supply chain globally is currently functioning, and yes, of course, we need very close interaction with a lot of our customers for planning purposes. However, if you look at the overall, I would almost say, inefficiency that still sits in that global supply chain to get the product from consumption all the way, from production all the way to consumption, I think it is still far away from the efficiency that is in the container trade. So there's quite a lot to learn, and obviously data is one of the key elements, because it helps you definitely to unlock a lot of value. If you only look at the bill for demurrage in the petrochemical industry on a global basis, that would be an indicator for inefficiency in the supply chain somehow. I think that says it all, and unlocking data to make the process transparent is extremely important. I think whatever we can do as an industry, again in collaboration, to work on unlocking that data and making the exchange of data available in a modern fashion through the modern technologies, I think that would help a lot. We're investing a lot in it, but I think that's besides the point for now. I think there's still a lot that we can do. Yeah. I know there's a lot of interest, but somehow we can't get it really to the next level as an industry, I think. So
Yeah.
there's definitely
There's
a
still
role
lots
that
of
I
value
see.
to unlock.
Yeah, I think so, and probably you recognize it, Henning.
If I can just follow up on that, when I say data, we have tons of data. It's actually the intelligence from that data. So the ability to gather exactly the information that we need from this, that is key. We got plenty of data. It's the right data, how to find it and how to convert that into decisions. That's really, and technology is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Sully, you mentioned something earlier a little bit about this being a temporary phase, the new normal. Do you want to expand on that at all and talk about that?
No, I think my colleagues addressed this properly, but I believe the ultimate solution, of course, is to reshape the whole supply chain concept more into supply chain resilience and localization. I know this is rather a new subject, but I think it's the proper time to talk about it. I see that localization of supply chain now is a necessity. It's not luxury anymore. Supply chains are, in general, are stretched, but I talk about the GCC supply chains are very much stretched because we are heavily dependent on export markets. So we go long hauls all the way to North and South America, Southeast Asia and Far East, Europe. And this is not very good. This is not very sustainable. It was, but not anymore. Therefore, we should really do something to localize good part of the supply chain. By doing so, you are reducing the risk, okay? Plus, also rationalizing your freight costs, which can be passed ultimately to the customers. And one important thing that we should never forget about is care for the environment. The longer hauls and the more shipments and the double handling will result in more emissions, very bad footprints. I must admit that our industry doesn't need any more bad publicity, and we really need to demonstrate something else. So by localizing such supply chains, you do all of that, you mitigate most of the risks, but also locally there are other benefits, adding more value to your resources, creating jobs, and also correcting the balance of trade and balance of payments with the others, because you will be exporting or selling more value products. Probably for most of us here, heard about the launch of His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman for two very important initiatives. One is the Global Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, and the other one is the National Industrialization Strategy. Both are real translation of this, hoping that, and inshallah ta'ala, we will live it in my life to see this region as a main industrial and logistic hub. This will shorten even the planning cycle greatly. And let me, if you allow me, just between two brackets and capitalizing on what the CEO of Saudi Aramco yesterday said, I'm sure most of you listened to him, announcing a big project for oil to chemicals. And that's going to be in South Korea. It's not going to be in Saudi Arabia. I would argue that this is localization of supply chain. If you do it there, you are closer to the market, and you will avoid a lot of double shipping, double handling, a lot of emissions, and additional costs that are, I know some of our shipping companies and storage companies may not be happy to see this, but I'm sure there will be plenty of business other than just doing things twice unnecessary and charging the end customer double what it costed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Salam. Henning, you're quite deep into the region. You focus across the GCC. Where do you see the main opportunities to increase regional value?
It's that particular question is worth a whole day of discussion. So it's a little bit difficult to boil this down to a 2-minute, but I'll try my best. I mean, first of all, it's important to live in a strong neighborhood. And GCC, having had the opportunity in my career, in my lifetime, to live in many different neighborhoods, I can certainly see there's quite a lot of potential here. That a lot of work is being done already, but there is additional potential. What I picked up also from the opening speeches yesterday was very encouraging, because there were comments about opportunities across the national borders. Mm-hmm. There were comments like taking leadership. I mean, this was also a little bit in and around sustainability. So I think the region here has quite a number of opportunities. I think the collaboration across borders, and we had a good prior discussion about that, and it links up nicely with the localization. Technology, digitization, I know I keep coming back to that, but that is key. Without getting into the politics around this, some alignment around the legislative frameworks that makes it easier to do business across borders. But I think the innovation, the R&D, in and around some policy making, and then some leadership and some thought leadership. Then that's where I really think this particular region here has some potential, mm-hmm. and we would all welcome that to be fulfilled.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think just a note, we've not received any questions, so please do submit questions. We're eager for those. Don't be shy in that regard. Bernd, regional differences, GCC versus the rest of the world. Any perspective on production, transportation?
To start with, I mean, you saw that in the beginning, that basically the GCC region is a major exporting hub, serving markets globally and fulfilling thereby a major function. But that is closely related to managing a huge complexity, different shipping locations, very different customers, lots of customer applications. And I think that is quite unique, because in the end, you're serving the global market, whereas if you look at Europe, a lot more with trade within Europe, also closer link between production and consumption. And I think that unique opportunity to further grow that, and we heard the themes in the morning, circularity, sustainability, also yesterday about innovation, application development. I think there's a significant opportunity, and I think what's really setting that apart, if you look at the last years, I mean, you all know the growth story here. It's fantastic, the momentum there is, the investment, also the willingness to change and to be innovative. I think that is really unique and gives a huge momentum for that region.
Yeah, wonderful. Before we come to the question that someone's kindly asked, panelists, any further comments on the opportunity for the GCC on a kind of global stage?
I think if I may, I think the importance of the region has increased quite a lot, and it will further increase. Because it has proven to be a reliable global energy partner. Mm-hmm. It has an unparalleled access and potential to continue to further grow, and we've seen that over the last, the announcements that came in yesterday as well. So I think with that combined also with the commitment that we also heard yesterday to actually drive the transition to a lower carbon future, I think is definitely very clear and very encouraging to hear from this part of the world. And I think that's a very important and clear step to recognize. I think when it gets to supply chains, that will put even in a way more pressure on supply chains,
Yeah.
because I think it will unbalance the world even more than it has been unbalanced, and that no matter if you cut it up, sell it, as you said, right? If you put it in South Korea, yes, that helps, but then still the product needs to be shipped. At least the raw material needs to be shipped over there. So even with all those good moves, I think it will leave the world even more unbalanced. And hence the key question: how do we get critical infrastructure at key strategic locations organized and efficient and transparent?
Yeah. Yeah. Please.
I can only re-emphasize what I said earlier. I think GCC has a leadership role to play, and the cohesiveness in the region and acting together as a region is very important, and something that I think we all need. We see a lot of. I go back to, I listened also here, the momentum that what is picking up now is amazing. I was very fortunate to spend the early 90s in China, when China was starting to open up and accelerate their development, and I see a lot of similarities, and it's very, very exciting to be part of and contribute to.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, are there any further comments on GCC on a global stage?
Yeah, I think the GCC, I'm talking about the chemicals and petrochemical industry in particular, they proved during the last 40 plus years that they are one of the most important and reliable suppliers. They sustained this despite all the turbulences and the big challenges that happened in their region. None of their customers ever suffered anything, despite all the big things that happened. I believe if there is any change, it will be even to the better. The region is blessed with abundance of raw materials in all sides, whether that's hydrocarbons or minerals. The industry, the chemicals and petrochemical industry is blessed to be literally back integrated to the oil and gas fields. And I don't think this is available. This is unmatched by any other region. This gives them full security of supply for raw materials at competitive cost. Plus, the region is the position of the geographical location of the region is also in the middle of, in the middle of the world, if you wish. After all, it's part of the Middle East, and the energy prices here are extremely, whether they are the classic or the renewables. This is the best place where you can get energy. So I believe, it is destined for more growth and hopefully more, and definitely more green as well, whether that's in the manufacturing side or in the supply chain side. Now, I think also let me just say nice things, because normally people will criticize governments and how slow they are and everything. I believe the GCC governments, deserve special recognition here. I think all the infrastructure that have been built, whether these are ports, airports, railroads, highways, you name them, are all cost centers. Nobody wants to invest in them. They don't bring money. And if they do, it is too little over a very long period of time. Ask Vopak about infrastructure in the world. And this is all done by the government of the GCC to a high standard. Another thing is that the petrochemical and chemical industry in the Gulf, in general, started by government-owned companies. So the government invested, and they launched the companies until they went from red to black to green, dark green. And then they invited their nationals to invest in them, taking all the risk, okay? And I think, this is an excellent way to put everybody, to let them hit the ground running, and that's why they are catching up with their friendly competitors in other parts of the world, is that the government gives them a very nice push. Now you ask me, can the governments do more? Definitely they can. I think the governments can improve a little bit in developing incentive schemes to attract both foreign as well as local investment in supply chain. A very generous scheme to help that sector, match what is being done at other parts of the world. They also can help, from government to government, because sometimes there are trade barriers, protectionism, and other things that go beyond the companies to bear. It has to be government to government. Every once in a while, because of our, I think, high quality products and competitive prices, sometimes there are unjustified anti-dumping cases that are raised from time to time against the GCC suppliers. This is also another role for the government to help them contain this and overcome it and talk, because this needs to be taken at another level. Of course, there are other things, but I believe the governments have done excellent work to, equalize the score with the rest of the competitors around the world. Thanks.
Thank you, Salah. One of the words I just wanted to pick up on, and perhaps I'd start with yourself, Henning, is collaboration. Yes. We've talked about it. It's a bit of a theme. What's your perspective on what it truly means from your perspective, and what's the role of collaboration?
I got a lot of perspective on this. My first point is really that collaboration is not the same as working together. And sometimes we get those two things mixed up. Successful companies, they collaborate. And you build collaboration when you have, you need to have the right partners. But you need to have shared values, you need to have shared purpose. I picked up on Mr. Sil Bassam's, the MC from yesterday, and he said something that I would like to quote here as well. Knowledge is power, but it's powerful when shared. And I thought that was that was very insightful, and I think that's the collaboration part. It's working together is not collaborating. That's just working together. Mm-hmm. Collaborating is when you share your proprietary knowledge and competencies, and the people you collaborate with share their proprietary knowledge and experiences, so that, because outsourcing is not collaborating, subcontracting is not collaborating. We have elevated the meaning of collaboration in the last couple of years, and now we are having discussions with our customers, partners. How do we impact each other's investments? This was not a discussion we had in the past. In the past, it would be, he needs a warehouse, so I'll build a warehouse. Now it's become much more, it reaches a new level. And I think the many disruptions that we have experienced recently, some bigger than others, but COVID of course being one of them, the impact of the whole world, but also logistics from the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, has almost cast a spotlight on, you cannot go through these difficult or changing times by yourselves. You do need to be an ecosystem player, and you do need to have those kind of collaborations. It's no longer, I've been doing this for a long time. In the past it was almost, if I am smarter than my competition, I will win. But it's almost as if that has, luckily, that is gone now. Mm-hmm. And the role of collaboration is almost a path to overcoming and being successful.
Any other comments on collaboration?
Yeah, I would echo that, and that obviously plays into what's happening in the last few years. If you then put on top of that the challenge that we have to basically build a complete new energy system over this decade, I think collaboration becomes even more important to get that organized. And I'm very encouraged, because I feel that in a lot of the discussions that we are having with customers, but also other parties across the supply chain, that openness, that is a general realization that there is much more openness to actually share, to be vulnerable, to realize that you don't have the answers for all the topics that are coming and being thrown at us as companies, and at the same time realizing that it's better to hold hands than to go at it alone. And I'm very encouraged that it is already happening, and I'm positive that will definitely help us, because that is needed going forward to provide for solutions.
Yeah. Let me just add one aspect to that. I mean, collaboration always has a bit the touch, we're doing that for the greater good. But we should be also very clear that in an area with such a turbulence, collaboration is adding substantial value, and value you can quantify in euros, in US dollars, whatever currency you're picking. And the point is, a lot of companies start to try and figure out what's happening in the downstream value chain, trying to predict, build models, etc. Getting together along the supply chain, exchanging information, having collaborative planning, exchanging what the downstream value chain steps see as market dynamics, how they do their planning, and then translating that backwards for the value chain. We all know that immediately impacts inventory levels, which is cost of capital. It impacts transportation costs if we know what the demand will be with sufficient lead times. So there's a lot of substantial value can be created with collaborative planning, with collaborative action.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I think perhaps we'll try and answer a few of these audience questions now, if we may. Bernd, perhaps I'll come back to you on the digitization piece number 3. Any comments on the localization? I think there's an interesting term there between localization and nationalization. I don't know whether anyone wants to. Sela, would you like to take that one? And then perhaps I'll come to Henning and Dick on number 1. So localization, perhaps, Sela, if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, well, I believe this is a personal perspective. It doesn't, localizing your supply chain doesn't mean bringing everything home, but making it where it makes sense, business sense, strategic sense. And I think that's what we are doing. Maybe, hearing the talks yesterday from His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, and later from the CEO of Saudi Aramco. It is a balance between the two, but I must admit that this region spent a lot of time, not spent, let me say wasted, a lot of time by not localizing a lot of the products that it doesn't export it in terms of, in the form of basic and intermediate products. There is a huge opportunity in the region to, add value to the products, shorten the supply chain, reduce the risk, reduce the footprints as well by localizing. That doesn't mean you can localize in Europe, you can localize in North America, you can do that in Far East as we are doing right now. And as rightly done even by some companies like my previous company, SABIC. You can see their footprints localized almost everywhere in North America by acquisition and then later on by expansion in Europe and also in Southeast Asia, Far East particularly. So I think it is a must-do thing right now, and this region offers, I believe, unparalleled opportunities for people to invest in adding value and completing part of the supply chain. You don't have to have everything. Okay, you can have some of the things and then let somebody else do the rest. I was told that BMW, for example, in Germany, I think they do only something like 35% of the car there in Germany. The rest of it comes from the rest of the world. And they are managing to produce, cars that is the liking for a lot of people.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Sela. Any other comments on localization, or should we perhaps address the...
I wouldn't mind just adding in one little point, because we've just spent the last 20 years globalization, and now deglobalization. I think it's important that we maintain a kind of a healthy balance.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become one or the other. But we all have a little bit of a... We all have different priorities, and we have things that we want to do. Obviously, globalization doesn't go away. But I think what we have experienced, for instance, with COVID, all of a sudden amplified the flip side of the coin in and around globalization. And I think it's quite healthy that we all take a step back, and evaluate how we are using globalization and where should we actually make more use of localization, but not completely localization, because then 10 years from now we'll be sitting here looking a little bit older talking about how do we re-globalize. So
Improve efficiency,
yeah.
just in time. Yeah, absolutely.
David, let me just add one aspect to what Henning just outlined. I mean, localization is sometimes misinterpreted as nationalization.
Yes.
I think that shouldn't be the case. Yeah? No. When we talk about localization, it's about still collaborating and not trying to bring that emotional aspect or that national aspect in it. Because in the end, it's still about building something which is, as we outlined in the beginning, secure, reliable, and agile in the sense of reacting to turbulences. And I think that whole layer of nationalization is not helping there necessarily. And we've got a lot of examples from the past where that nationalization didn't really work out. So I think keeping in mind that we are still living in a world where we see trade. No nation is self-sufficient. So we will see trade, we will see trade flows, we will see a lot of shipments. However, basically that we have a single plant supplying the whole world, I think that was shown very clearly puts us at a lump sum risk. And that's why the whole localization, building redundancy, reliability into the system, I think that's what we are targeting. It's not the national stamp or flag on it and say, now we localized. I think that's often something we should really keep in mind. Two very separate things.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Perhaps then we'll address question number one. Anyone want to start us on that?
Yeah,
please
sure.
Dick, go ahead.
No, on ESG, so how will supply chains, I don't know, can the audience, the audience can see it. So how will the supply chain cooperate with ESG? The way I would look at it, and I talk again for my part of the industry, I think first and foremost we have a responsibility ourselves to reduce our own emission footprint that we have. And the emission footprint of a company like Vopak, a terminal company, is with the energy that we use and whether we can reduce that energy and whether we can electrify as much as we can and therefore green the use of energy. That's the main purpose and that's the main source of emissions that we have. That's our first priority, but that's in the bigger scheme a relatively minor element in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. I think the bigger role that we play and that supply chain as a whole plays is the more systemic role of enabling new energy systems to form. And in order for those new energy systems to form, you have new commodities that will be shipped in different parts of the world. It will still be a world, in our view, where there's a massive dislocation between those locations where energy is being produced and locations where energy is being consumed. So you need transport, you need supply chains, and in order to facilitate those supply chains, you need infrastructure at the key and critical locations. And that, I think, is the key systemic role that, at least from our part, we should be playing in the energy transition, so linking that to the ESG situation. I think that's the most important thing, and that's where we have to look at influencing and supporting any start of new technologies. That can be, and that's a role for companies like ours as well, and the industry as a whole, to make sure that we foster that. And second of all, that we take a collaborative step, work together with other parties to make sure that that infrastructure gets developed, and whatever is needed to work with governments and customers and local entities to help establish that and put ourselves on very strict targets, I think is critical to realize that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Henning, please.
Yeah, I know it's a choice of words. How will supply chains cooperate with ESG? I'm actually tempted to say, how will supply chains be guided by ESG? Because I think we all of us are spending, well, we are for sure, spending much more time on ESG than we did just 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. So cooperate, collaborate. I'm in complete agreement with what you're saying. But I'm actually thinking that we actually have to start taking some guidance from ESG also. And we had a discussion early on. What does a good investment look like? Or it was one of the questions we had talked about. And I think, if I think back about the many investments, we're all here doing many investments, I think for many, many years it was purely about financials. Is this a good financial investment? And I think actually the world is changing a bit. So we're looking at investments now like, what is the impact on society for this particular investment? What is the impact on your values, on the purpose? And then, maybe my bosses will not completely agree, or the finance people will not completely agree, but I think the financial returns are taking, maybe not a back seat, but at least they're sharing the front seat with something like ESG and our purpose. So corporate is just a chosen word. I think it's something that we will turn to ESG for guidance also, and be guided by that, I think, in the future.
Yeah, wonderful, thank you. Bernd, we did have a question up there about digitization in the supply chain. Do you want to comment on that perhaps before we talk a little bit about, perhaps we'll talk next about some of the disruptions that happen. So digitization, please.
Yeah, I mean, if we again go back to what we are solving for reliable, secure, efficient, and agile supply chain, then we said basically that collaborative action ecosystems are a major part of that. And if you then think how to get that done, I mean, you cannot do that manually, you cannot do that by phone. The number of data which we need are far too big to be exchanged on paper and printed out. So I think there's a very, very crucial role for new technology. And especially if you think through the collaborative action, getting insights from customers, speedily translating that into actions, into planning, shipments, product allocations. And just keep in mind that in the end, we're talking about thousands of products, thousands of customers, even more shipping lanes and individual units which are shipped. This cannot be handled in a manual way. So I think it requires automation, it requires data and insights, and it requires also a lot of interfaces between companies exchanging information in a seamless way. And I think that's why, from my perspective, that digitalization is such a crucial backbone for whatever we want to solve for in supply chain. And I also include basically the whole ESG aspect. Because if you think from well to customer, and we want to find the optimum from an ESG, from a financial perspective, and trade-off between the two in a way that we meet the requirements of the current situation, that cannot be done in a manual way with pen and paper. So that's why I think there's a crucial role for optimization and thereby also technology enablement and digitalization.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
If I may add to that, I think our industry in general is still characterized by a lot of that digitization and sharing of data point to point without actually allowing, let's say, a more collaborative view on data and a more platform type of view on data. And I know you have to start walking before you can run. So first get eventually data in place and get them to share with the customer. But I think there's still a lot of value to be unlocked in collaborating, making certain data available in platforms, allowing a lot of different service providers, people with knowledge, to add value actually to the data rather than being just a point-to-point exchange.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think we have a couple of themes coming out in the questions about what we can learn from COVID. I actually wanted to take perhaps a step back from that and think about COVID as a pandemic. We've also mentioned the geopolitical situation, new conflicts. We've had two pretty major events. There was talk about the question was really what was the lesson learned from COVID? What can we learn from those major disruptions? Are there going to be more major disruptions in pandemics or global conflicts? Or are there new disruptions that we can't foresee? How do we change and reflect on the last 2 years?
I think a lot of books have been written about what we learned from COVID. And I think a lot of the things we have been talking about today are learnings from what we have all had to go through COVID. I think we have spent a lot of time researching and formulating. The couple of things is that you need to be able to imagine the inimaginative, the stuff you cannot imagine, because we did not have a plan ready for the whole world to close down, because this was well beyond, where the. But you need to be able to react to it very quickly. It links up to what we were talking about earlier. You cannot, in a situation like the whole world is shutting down, you cannot overcome that by yourselves. You need to have those collaborative networks that you can engage with, because at the end of the day, it's not a question about whether we get through COVID or as Maersk or as Vopak or as somebody else. It's how do we all get through this so we can get back to doing our business afterwards. And I think that was one very big realization. The other one that came out, because we spent a fair bit of time taking a lot of feedback from many of our partners and customers in and around this. The number one thing that we noticed was the decision-making cycles or the decision-making process. In many places, this one can be kind of cumbersome and slow. But then all of a sudden, 3 days into the lockdown, all of a sudden we were all able to make decisions relatively quickly. We had a little war room, we had teams, and I was hoping so much that when this COVID was over, that we could actually continue to operate like that.
Yeah.
But we are people, we are humans, we're coming back to our normal structure on how to make good, sound decisions. But if anything we learned from this is that when we need to, we can be flexible, we can be agile, and we can make very fast decisions. That was very encouraging from that.
Flexibility, agility, two very good words. Sela, any historical context on that? You must have experienced significant disruptions across all sorts of lighting events, all sorts of events that have occurred.
Yeah.
Any perspective on the last few years in the broader sense?
Well, we all went through that, and everybody has his own perspective about it. But there was a complete panic across the world. Okay, even with very well-established systems and everything, they just collapsed during the pandemic. I've seen shipments of masks and other relevant sterilizers being diverted. They are fully paid for and everything, but in such chaos, unfortunately, things doesn't work. I will have to go back to my earlier statement. Localization of supply chain and resilience in supply chain is the solution. There is no 100% solution, but at least we don't live through the same thing that we went through during the first break of the pandemic. And there will be other situations. I really cannot predict whether that is geopolitical problems, another pandemic, or I really don't know. But the world, unfortunately, doesn't learn. We talked about this region 4 times. I didn't add the pandemic because it is global, okay? And I didn't add what happens in the Ukraine, because that's again global, but you can add it here. And it is sad if we don't really do something as soon as possible to localize our supply chains. When we say, I'm sorry to repeat, probably what my colleague says. I'm not saying that we create a silo where we will do everything and we will forget about the rest of the world. No. I'm talking about localizing what must be localized to make it easier, cheaper, and faster to the rest of the world to enjoy it. Otherwise, you cannot live in isolation of the rest of the world. I remember some in the past, the late 60s and 70s in this region, without mentioning a name, some countries claimed that they want to produce everything from the needle to the rocket. And they, unfortunately, ended up destroying their own economies and their industries. We are not after that. We are after where to make it, where does it make a lot of sense, economical sense, strategical sense. And I'm very happy to see, such direction is taken by the region in general, Saudi Arabia in specific, where the highest authorities are launching such initiatives that we will enjoy them in a very short time span, bi'idhnillah.
Let me just add one comment on Salah's comment. There's also a big difference between a response and maybe a recovery and resilience. Salah, you talked about a lot about resilience. When I think back, when we were during COVID-19, I had the opportunity to work with the World Economic Forum during the industry action groups. And you easily fall into the mental trap. Once there's a pandemic, you think you need to prepare for the next pandemic. But what came was a war in Ukraine, which no one anticipated. And if you fast forward, the biggest next shock disruption is unlikely something we can predict today. So that's why the response, having solved COVID-19, maybe solving for energy crisis in Europe or electricity or supply chain disruption, is only one element. It doesn't give us resilience going forward unless we fundamentally work on the key components of a successful supply chain, meaning resiliency, redundancy, localization, and that will probably give us a lot more a midterm and long-term perspective to master crisis and disruptions and saying, okay, we solved this, and then mentally tick that, and falling into the trap only because we had one pandemic, the next shock will be another pandemic. That's certainly not the case.
Yeah, very good. Wonderful. One of the further questions bubbling there is really about the impact of circularity and a little bit associated with that, the recycling side on supply chains. Any comments in that regard, Dick? I know you've talked a little bit about the future new energy world, if you like.
Yeah, I think some of the other questions was also, do the ambitions that are being stated by the industry, are they sufficiently supported by the supply chain, and what do they require? I think it requires quite some fundamental changes in the supply chain, because it's obviously different products that are going to be moved around to and from different locations. I think it therefore has a major impact. I think there's a lot of elements to look at when you look at the circular economy. And again, if I take a step back and look at it from the fact that what we're trying to do here is also help the industry decarbonize and help the industry lower Scope 3 emissions, I think that's also sending a different type of level of urgency of what we need to get to as and the role that the supply chain plays in that, in terms of the investments that we can do to support our customers in that. So we're very committed to work on that. It's new territory in order to get into that and to find the role, but very committed because it's important for our customers in the manufacturing and energy sectors.
Henning, are you yet seeing conversations about how this will impact logistics?
Every day. I mean, but also as people in the logistics world, it's kind of funny, right? Because we do end-to-end logistics, but you just eliminated the end because it doesn't end anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So you cannot do end-to-end logistics in a circular economy. So we have a lot of things that we need to rethink. I think we talked about it earlier. And we have decisions to make whether we want to become experts in that as well, or we need to collaborate, team up with somebody else. I think the challenge with circular economies, and particularly in and around the supply chains and the logistics around it, we know it is coming. We know it needs to be done. Somebody needs to take the first step, or a lot of people are taking first steps. It has to become viable.
Yep.
It has to be supported by legislation. And we're slowly, all of us, making progress in this direction. I think it will, and if I remember back to the last GPCA that we had, there was also a little bit of a discussion around this. Should this be pushed by government legislation, or is it being pulled by business opportunities? And probably it has to be a bit of both. I think the more long-term solution, the more sustainable solution, is that it becomes a viable business case. That, from a logistics point of view at least, to get into that.
Yeah. Understood.
Maybe let me add one aspect. I mean, it's a very straightforward question, yeah? How does circularity impact the supply chains? Yeah? But we all know, yeah, there's not one circle. Yeah?
No.
I mean, we will see, first of all, from a conceptual perspective, very different circles. From reuse, we had mechanical recycling, chemical recycling, bio-based raw materials. Yeah? First of all, there's a lot of concepts. Yeah? If we take that down on a product level, yeah, there will be thousands of new supply chains, logistics ways, transport modes to really bring that to life. And I think the complexity of that, I think it's a straightforward, simple one-line question. If you double-click in the solutions, we will end up with thousands of new logistics, transport modes, products, offerings to really bring that to life. And I think designing that, we will redesign supply chains, the way we think about it, the way we act, the way we have used certain products, the way we consume, will face significant changes. All doable, don't get me wrong, but I think that change will be a continuous one, and requires very, very many steps and very many solutions.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things we've been discussing as the GCC is the prevalence of industrial clusters here, Nick. I think, do the industrial clusters support flexible supply chains? Do they help in the GCC?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that it is so we're active here already for over 20 years, and especially in the kingdom with our partner SABIC, and facilitating as an expert, facilitating the exports of what we see around 30 million tons of products that are being exported out of the region, which is massive. I think going forward, ensuring that we stay competitive, and competitiveness can be achieved by being transparent and by fostering transparency between partners in the supply chain. I mean, this is I think a very attractive model, as massive investments are needed in production facilities, in new supply chain facilities, and I think the industrial cluster and the logistics center of that, leaving that to whoever the industrial specialist might be, but leaving that cooperation in the hands also of industrial specialists is something that is super successful for the region, and it has been in other places as well. So we are obviously a strong advocate of that, and I think it has worked quite well in this part of the world.
Yeah. Absolutely, I think so. And Henning, we've been talking about investments. You've been talking about someone blinking first, almost the. Anything else required to make these investments successful? Any critical requirements?
I'm sure there is, but I think I would like to go back to my point from earlier, jumping the gun there a bit. I think that the way we look at investments today are very different than what we looked at them before. I think that particular investment or that particular initiative, its impact on society is just a question that comes up. I mean, we have plenty of processes for getting investments approved in our company, and what we have seen in the last 5-6 years, we will not get an investment approved for whether it's a warehouse or a ship or anything, unless the whole sustainability and environment angle is included in it. We are not allowed to build warehouses without solar panels, without water recycling, without impact on the local community. And I think in many ways it moves a little bit the focus away from the highest return on investment. It is still important, but we need to also start considering the impact on society as a return on your investment. I don't know how to calculate it, but I certainly know what good looks like, and over time we will find a methodology for that as well.
Wonderful. Before we take that question on cybersecurity that's come up, I think we've addressed most of the other audience questions. We've talked a little bit about youth. We've heard that as a strong mandate. So, are any comments about how we encourage, how we bring more of the youth into supply chain world?
Thanks, David. This is a very critical challenge that probably this area faces, probably other areas too. But the good news is that supply chain is, unlike other functions, it's very tolerant to wide spectrum of academic disciplines. So, in engineering, in finance, in IT, in accounting, in business administration, after all, the supply chain is mostly looked at as the breeding ground for the rest of the organization. And then they can just pick out from there. On the challenging side is that we only have a few colleges and universities in the region who offer supply chain as a separate academic discipline. Raising awareness of supply chain. Supply chain came to the front pages only after the pandemic, and everybody start to talk about supply chain, and some of them, they don't know what's behind it. So awareness of supply chain is extremely important. Talking to the high school, the third grade of high school, ready to go to university, telling them about it, or in the orientation years in the universities before they go to choose their academic discipline, just to tell them how good supply chain is as an excellent career path for them. You need to tell them. They don't know much about it. Now, how it is being done here in the kingdom, we still have a long way. We are doing a lot, but it is far away from enough. Through the Supply Chain and Procurement Society. And just a little bit of propaganda, if you allow me for a minute. It is a non-profit organization with volunteers. We already have 300 plus volunteers who will come and do that, coming from different industries and organizations. So we have people from Saudi Aramco, from SABIC, from Tasniya, from Arasco, even from STC and banks and everybody volunteering part of their time. And they are mostly either senior people working there or retired. So they will come and will bring their knowledge to the society and give it. I'm not saying that we are like Robin Hood who steals from the rich and gives to the poor, but we copy the good practices in these big companies and make them available, especially for SMEs, for small and medium enterprises and entrepreneurs. We work under the umbrella of the Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources. They have been so kind to take us under their wings and to make us integrated part of their activities and their strategies. We are supported by sponsors and collaborators, including Saudi Aramco, SABIC, Tasniya is a big supporter, STC, Local Content Authority, to name few, but we do have also. So we are the human capital. We talked about supply chain, but we never talk about the people who will operate it. Another dilemma is, how to bring GCC females into the supply chain. It is a very nice area. Most elements of the supply chain offer good jobs for females, and we are trying also to attract them into it and to tell them, about the good opportunities. The only challenge we had is that they are beating guys now, so we need to do less of it. The ladies are very aggressive and they are learning fast and they are very eager really to climb up. So guys, watch out. You may lose some of your jobs.
Yeah. As a parent to both a son and a daughter, I can attest to this very fact. Very good, very good. Thank you, Sela. So perhaps before we take some closing remarks from the panel, top question is really about cybersecurity. Bernd, would you like to start us on that very point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we have that question up here because I think it's a key concern. If you look at how we are structured, how we are set up, electronic information exchange, email, etc., I think we are fully dependent on basically reliable data exchange, digital exchange, email, you name it. And we also saw in the last years an increasing number of attacks. Yeah? Can be ransomware, can be political actors, etc. Yeah? I think the threat is bigger than ever. And if you look at, it's typically not making the headlines even more in the newspapers, but it's in the small print. Yeah? Number of municipalities shut off. Yeah? Companies taking ransomware. Complete data sets being deleted. I think that's a thing which will haunt us over the next years more and more. So any investments into IT security, but also OT security, plus the whole collaboration layer, is more relevant than ever. If you look at what's happening now in Ukraine, in Russia, the cyber component in that one, it's scary. If you translate that to any bug, any virus, any worm, in quotes, escaping there, just by accident, that can lay havoc to a lot of what we are discussing on supply chain reliability. And to be honest, this is one of the disasters we have not yet seen.
Yes.
So I think that is something. We had COVID-19. We had a war. We had Panama Canal disruptions. Suez Canal disruptions. That is something which again will take us with a big element of surprise. So investments into that, from my perspective, really crucial. To keep the supply chains up and running.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bernd. With that, Dirk, Henning, Sela, would you like to add any closing comments?
If I would start, maybe a few key words, and I think a lot has been said. First of all, thanks for having the opportunity and having this conversation. I like the format. Thanks to GPCA and the organization for a fantastic organization, fantastic venue that we have here in Riyadh. If there's a few key words, collaboration, redundancy in supply chains, security of supply, I think are some of the key words that I am taking along from the discussion over here. And other than that, I'm just asking whoever is left in the audience if you have if you're still in doubt on who to support on the World Cup, because Saudi Arabia is out. The Dutch are playing on Friday night. They play Argentina. And for anyone that is still looking for someone to support, the Netherlands is welcoming your support. So thanks for that. Sorry, Henning, to talk about that. I couldn't resist it.
I'm Danish, and the Danish team didn't do so well. I was having the pleasure of watching the match last night with my Spanish colleague. That also did not go so well. So I'm kind of like easing away from the football discussions now, not having a good year on that. Also would like to thank for the opportunity. I think it has been, as a regular participant and guest to the GPCA in Dubai, been very impressed, and our team has been very impressed with the organization here, and we hope this is going to be a returning venue because we enjoy being here. I have to say the experience for me was the 1, 2, or 3 opening speeches yesterday. Mm-hmm. It completely blew me away. And I have quoted a couple of them already, but I forgot who it was who said we need actions, not words, because we already have a lot of words, but we actually need actions, and I completely agree with that. That's truly endorsed, and I hope also not hasty decisions or hasty actions, but let's accelerate the decision-making process and get started.
Wonderful, thank you, Henning. Sela.
Again, thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Wahab, and to the rest of the GPCA members and colleagues. Bringing the event here to Saudi Arabia is a major thing, and thank you very much. I understand it's going to rotate. I think also a special thanks and recognition that you may not know, not all of you know about the GPCA. GPCA is the first organization to recognize supply chain and its importance. They run a yearly conference, a very well prepared 2 to 3 days conference, bringing different colors to conferences, bringing even youngs and others. It is a meeting point, and it is a learning point as well. I encourage everybody to take a note of it. Normally it is held in Dubai, maybe this year also in Dubai, I really don't know, but wherever it is, it's beautiful to attend. Last but not least, yes, we talk about collaboration and planning and everything. I think you felt the atmosphere yesterday, and also for the past few years in Saudi Arabia, we are more after action rather than words.
Yes.
And things are translated in the ground. I see this region being the hub, the industrial and the logistics hub of the world later on. That will not be on the account of the others, because we are building on the expansion of the economies, but I encourage everybody to take a note of it and be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salah. Bernd, any final questions?
Yeah, I mean, we spent now a good 1 hour trying to explain how ideally we had a crystal ball, which unfortunately we do not have, so we cannot predict the future. So we have to work around. And I want to say a big thank you for GPCA for providing a forum for that topic. Big thank you to the panelists, to the excellent preparation and the team behind it. But also a big thank you to the audience for all these exciting questions and for all the interactions. So happy to be here. Big thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. A round of applause for the panel, please. Thank you. Great. And with that, we'll close. Thank you very much.
Thank you.